We're really going to be talking about financial matters and pertaining family life, because really this is a family ministry that is hosting this event. And so we're going to be just talking about finances post-COVID. How do you bounce back? What are families supposed to be doing? What are couples meant to be doing in this season to ensure that they bounce back strongly and actually not just thrive not just bounce back, but actually thrive the way they were intended to. Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. Like God wants us to thrive to the full. And so we're very, very glad to be just sharing this evening. So as you've heard, my name is Murithi Wanjao, and I'm a pastor. First of all, I always say that's my first designation. I'm a son of God. I'm a person who believes that my calling in Christ is the most important thing for me of everything else I do, and actually is the foundation of everything I do. And in addition, I'm an author. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a father and a husband to this beautiful woman here. And Carol, as you've also heard, is a pastor, or as you might know, is a pastor, and she's also a marriage and family therapist. So family is really strongly something she's passionate about. She's also an author, and we've co-authored several things together. She's an entrepreneur. We have 3 children. We have 3 amazing children who range between 20 years and one who's just about to turn 18. And so we are now at the age where we are parents of adult children, and that's an interesting season to be in. We've been married for 28 years, and we're excited to at the family that God has given us. We've written several books together, including one called Ndoa, which is a 10-week online course that helps couples build a foundation for married life. And it's used by couples in many churches across the world, but also Couples and Money, which is a 10-week course. It's an online course actually, and it helps couples understand how to manage finances together and to win together financially. And we're actually going to be referring a bit to that course today in the lessons we're going to be teaching. So yeah, I don't know if you want to say hi.
Yes, hi everyone. We're so excited to be here. As my husband says, we are no stranger to Destiny Life Church, and we love your pastors. And in fact, the last time we were there was, I don't know when, was it this year? And we just saw the amazing work that you have done of putting up the building. That was such a brave and courageous thing to do, especially knowing that it happened even while COVID was going on.
Thriving during COVID.
We love and that is possible.
Amen. So today we're going to be talking about as couples and families, some of the financial mistakes that couples are making in this season that will make it very hard for them to bounce back. In fact, it'll create a lot of regret. So we want to come at it from that perspective. Just some of the challenges that couples are making, some of the mistakes that couples are making that will make it hard for them to bounce back after COVID. And in the process, we want to help you understand how to avoid those mistakes. So you don't just bounce back, but as we said earlier, you thrive going forward. Because after all, crisis will always come. That's the thing you always need to understand. There should never be a feeling that there's an accident happening, because there will always be crisis. And I think I talked earlier about the fact that when you understand history, you're going to find that there are actually cycles, historical cycles that come every so often. So it should never be a surprise to us when we have a crisis. So for instance, I'll share that. If you look at that roadmap of crisis, it's a global and historical roadmap. And you can see 1910, the beginning of the last century, cholera, that was a pandemic. This is not the first pandemic that has ever come. That was a pandemic. 1918, this was even worse because cholera was followed by Spanish flu. So it's like coming out of COVID and then another one comes that's just as bad, and it wipes out many people. And then following right after that, 10 years later, the Great Depression. And then after that, you've got the Suez Canal crisis. You've got the Asian flu in 56, another pandemic.
Not to mention the world wars in between there.
And there are world wars, which are not even mentioned there, by the way, that are going on in between there.
Yeah.
1973, the OPEC oil price shock, which shook the whole world. 1982, the international debt crisis. And again, that was a massive one. Countries went broke, and there was hyperinflation across the world. The Gulf War, that was actually an international crisis. Some of these we might have felt a bit sheltered in those early days because our economy was not as connected with the global economy, but people were suffering across the world. And it also affected us. That's why we used to experience some of those structural adjustment programs that we were going through. The world was actually going through a difficult time. US embassy bombing, that one was very personal, happened here. That was a crisis, affected the shilling and standard of living here. The Latin America debt crisis, global financial crisis of 2007 was a major, major impact. European crisis, the 2020 was a COVID pandemic. We've not even mentioned every 5 years in Kenya, there's what we call the election cycle crisis. And right now, right following the COVID is the election cycle. I think what I want you to understand, looking at this diagram, if there's one thing that is constant in life, it is crisis. You should never let it be that it is a crisis that kept you from achieving your God-given purpose, because crisis will come. Crisis will always come. And these are just those are examples of global crisis that have nothing to do with us, and they affect us even though they had nothing to do with us. But in addition to those global crises, there are also personal crises that come, and we are all aware of things that happen that also affect us. And some of them include things like peer pressure. You find pressure to buy a new car, to buy a new suit, to buy new clothes. That's a crisis that will affect you financially. Debt burden. Many people are carrying a heavy debt burden after COVID. Maybe you took a loan to finance your business. One of the things we teach people is debt is actually a dangerous trap for believers. It's one of the things that the devil can use to keep you from achieving your destiny. Trappings, looking good, emergencies, personal emergencies, things that had nothing to do with you. Somebody fell sick, indiscipline. There's so many things. Some of them are caused outside, but there's also things that are happening on the inside. So with all this happening, you need to be asking yourself, how do we thrive despite the cycles? Despite the cycles, because despite those cycles, you're going to find some people thrive and still succeed, and then there are others who will crash.
Yeah.
And I think there's a story we were just talking about even earlier.
Yeah, we were discussing, matters recently with one of our mentors, and he told us something that greatly troubled us. And he told us about a couple who he was counseling, who, like him, they were in their early 60s, and they had both had, serious positions, very senior positions at work. And, now this other couple, they had earned a lot of money between the two of them over the years. Now their kids had studied in, these very prestigious schools. In fact, we call them group of schools in this continent and even beyond. However, now that they were about to retire, they were facing a major crisis. And even though, they have, a beautiful house or home in Kilimani and drive a beautiful Range Rover, they have almost nothing in their savings, and they have to work much harder than they should be at this stage. Now, this is what our mentor was telling us. And this was because they were, and they were very afraid of losing their jobs. Now, much of their money right now, it was going into paying off debts, and in some months, all that they had after they had paid off the debts, all that they had to live on after paying off all their obligations was about 20,000 Kenya shillings. And the worst thing, our friend informed us, is that he knows quite a lot of other wealthy looking couples who are in the same position. I mean, this couple was not unique. There were so many of his friends who were in that position. And as we sought to understand how this could be, especially given the fact that the couple that we were talking about were senior managers, some of them were even CEOs, we realized that there were decisions they had made in their lives, throughout their working lives, that had unknowingly led them to their current predicament. And so today, we want to share with you these lessons that many couples are making today, and also how to avoid making these same mistakes.
Absolutely. Now, I think we're not talking about couples who are not Christians, couples who are blowing their money in bars. No. We're actually talking about Christian couples who have lived well, have served in church, have had senior positions, have had lots of money, and yet are in financial crisis. And so I think one of the things that it's so important to understand, and one of the things that actually for us we began to understand is never be fooled by how people look, because people look very wealthy, but then you don't understand how people are suffering underneath. And these couples have many of, we were surprised when you're telling us about this, because these are couples who are well known, who have done well, at least from what we look at, but are really struggling. And it's very easy to say it's the economy, it's the crisis we're in. But actually, what we began to realize is that there are actually decisions, mistakes in the decisions that these couples were making. And so there are several lessons that we've just been able to unearth as we've talked about, as we've just researched this a bit more. And what we want to do is, as we share, we're going to be sharing several mistakes that couples are making today, especially in this season, that I think are going to be dangerous for them later on. And I want you, as you listen, to note which one you sense is the biggest danger for you as a couple. And so if you're with your spouse, you take your notes and then you compare later. If you're alone, just write it. Maybe later you can get hopefully get a chance to get a recording. I notice this is being recorded. And the question to be asking is, which are the mistakes? Because I think the Bible says a wise man sees danger and flees from it. So when you see the danger you're in, you're able to address it and to know how to avoid it. And so let's talk about the 5 mistakes. I hope you're ready for the 5 mistakes. So let's talk about the 5 mistakes that many couples are facing today in this season.
So mistake number 1 is not investing early enough. And the unfortunate thing is that many couples come to realize too late that they should have started investing in assets a lot earlier than they eventually did. And that is in their 20s and 30s. And especially at these ages, you find that, people have a lot of disposable income, but it slips through their fingers as we live comfortably with the idea that we are still young. So some made small investments, a plot here, some shares here, when the opportunity arose, but nothing consistent, nothing that is disciplined. Among those who invested, the biggest investment they made was purchasing a home. In fact, they don't call it a house, they call it a home. And a family home, fine, yes, it does provide security, it provides some stability, and sometimes even status. And so couples end up, being overhoused. And what this simply means is investing too much money in their first home, often taking expensive mortgages that that they have to pay throughout their working life, which means that they're not left with enough money to make other significant investments towards their retirement. And so you find that when couples, when they're in their 50s and 60s, they begin to panic when they realize that they have not set enough money aside for a comfortable retirement, at least at the level at which they were living before.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you need to understand is, I don't know if you've ever noticed when people retire, that sometimes they die very quickly after. And it's not that they're old. It's just that the shock, you're so used to living at a certain level. People are always calling you. You have a certain level of income. You can make certain decisions. Airtime, you can call when you want. You can travel when you can call an Uber. Those things, all of a sudden you find you don't have the capacity to live that way. And it can be very, very, very difficult for people to adjust to that. And so that's what we're finding is couples in their 60s, early 70s, just facing shock. And people, even maybe you're forced to go up country, and yet you don't know people there. So even relationally, your life becomes very poor. And those are the factors that lead to early death. And so I think this whole thing about not investing early enough, waiting until they're older to start investing, I think it's one that is a major crisis.
Yeah.
And buying a house. I mean, I think we almost made that mistake when we were younger.
Yeah.
We almost bought our first house at a cost that would have cost us many years to pay.
Yeah.
That whole thing you're talking about being overhoused. Huh?
Yeah.
And so this couple that our mentor was talking about, that's exactly what they'd done. That house, they'd been paying their mortgage ever since for many years. And it was not bringing the money. It was actually a liability, not an asset.
Not an asset. And worse still, when our mentor asked them if they could relocate to a cheaper house and rent out their house, they flatly refused.
Yeah.
They were not able to do so because their image was completely intertwined. This house let's call it a home, was a status symbol. And so despite being broke, they still looked quite rich. Now, this is despite the fact that their effective income after paying off debts was around 20,000 Kenya shillings or $200 a month. So guys, this is one thing that we keep saying. Do not be deceived by looks. Your rich looking neighbor or relative or friend could be faking it. I don't know if we can say this enough. Do not fall into this trap, which is why at Couples and Money, we teach couples how to start investing where they are with what they have.
Yeah.
And we even provide a free professional financial advice to help a couple get there.
So that's a mistake. And remember, we're saying assess yourself and say, is there a danger for me? Are we in a danger that maybe we've not started early enough? And somebody said, yeah, they like those names of Kiongozi. You know, you walk into a place and people give you chief, you know, and they give you big names. And of course, you feel you're the Bazoo, you're the Sonko, you're whatever they call you. And it just makes you feel so good. But then it's actually, you're actually being set up.
Stroking your ego.
Yes. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, somebody said, address the fact that in Africa, you bear the burden of educating your siblings. And so investing becomes a mirage. And actually, you know, we actually do carry significant burdens. But I still say, I mean, at the end of the day, there is a way that you're able to start thinking ahead. And many times what happens is we realize that at a young couple, many times we live at a level where we are barely making it. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about even as we go along, that actually you can change your way of living and achieve a lot more just because of the way of thinking that you have. So this is the first mistake. I'm going to talk about the second mistake even as we go ahead, and then I can see there are many questions coming, so we'll keep, please keep asking them, by the way. Hopefully we'll get some time at the end to ask them, to answer them. But a second mistake, and this one might surprise you, that we found for many couples making today, and even back with a couple that our friend talked to us about, our mentor, is over-investing in your children's education. That one I know will surprise many people. Over-investing in your children's education. Of course, we as Africans, we value education. It's a thing that will pull you out of poverty. It's a thing that will make sure that you don't live the same way as your parents did. That's how we were taught, and that's what we believe. But you know, one of the way we learned about this one is we happen to be in a group of older couples, all of them in their 60s. All of them, some of them have been very successful in life.
They were actually professionals. They were architects.
Exactly.
They were engineers. So it wasn't.
So they're wealthy people.
I
mean, they're good friends.
Yeah.
And one of the conversations that we had that really opened our eyes is when we started talking about what is the biggest regret you have at this age when it comes to your finances.
Yeah.
And to our surprise, many of them, the biggest regret, in fact, the consensus was that most of them said that they spend too much on their kids' education. And some of them said that despite sending their kids to very expensive private schools, both primary and high school, those group of schools you're talking about, some of them even picked good foreign universities, South Africa, UK, etc., Malaysia. But they found that in the years later, yes, it was not to say that the schools were bad. They were very good schools. But they realized that they could have actually, they found that their kids, in competing with the kids who went to local schools, were not necessarily that highly advantaged.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to it, because it really cost them their retirement.
It really did. And I think the unfortunate thing for us, I don't know, it's just here in Kenya or in Africa, you know, there's the myth that the more expensive a school is, the better the education that is offered, and therefore the better children in these schools will perform later in life. And this is really just a big lie.
Yeah.
It is a myth.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because even the school, maybe even right now, we sort of justify it. We say, you know what, but it's this school, you know, it's not we're not in Brookhouse, we're not in those Peponi, we're not there. But you know, I honestly think a lot of couples, and even for us, to some extent, we've been able to look back at some decisions we made earlier with education, and we say we could have actually paid a lot less for that, and ended up with the same result that we're having right now.
Yeah.
And so I really believe that that's an issue that couples, it's an emotive issue, it's an emotional issue But I feel like that's a major one that many couples and many of them regret. Like, for instance, some of these couples who are now working way into their 60s, you know, and by the time you're employed in your 60s, you're at a senior level. And let me tell you, when you're at a senior level and you're being paid very big bucks, the organization is not expecting you to just be at home having an easy life.
You pay for it.
I mean, you're going to be a regional executive, you're traveling, you cannot be home. And that's the time your body wants to slow down. That's the time you want to see your children. And because you can see they're leaving the house, that's the time you want to be with your spouse. But they couldn't.
That's the time you want to relax and then smell
yeah, you've been working so many years, but they couldn't. And they were saying, we wish we could slow down, but we have no choice but to stay in that grind. And they had lots of regrets. And so one of the things that, as we're just talking about couples of money, one of the things that we like to teach is how to help couples agree on their joint priorities and to plan their income streams together so they don't run dry. I mean, so that they don't run into this crisis of not having the right priorities. It's actually a priority issue. And we found that many times couples make the wrong priority investments. And right now, there are couples who are making that decision, and it will actually hinder how well they're able to succeed, especially in times like the ones we're in today.
Yeah, that's so true. So,
so we talk about the third one.
Yeah, mistake number three is not investing enough in important relationships.
Yeah.
And this one, I think, is surprising for many people. And this mistake is not only common among many couples, but it is also socially very acceptable.
Christians and non-Christians.
Christians, everybody. So it is quite understandable when the husband or wife works long hours away from home, or even if the two work and live in different countries or even continents, because they're earning for the family, isn't it? And we want the best, especially for the kids. Even relatives understand this. And especially in these difficult economic times, this is perfectly understandable and acceptable. Now, the one great disadvantage that we have found in this strategy is that it develops patterns of separation, which means that a couple does not just get used to staying apart, but they cannot even stay in the same house for very long. When they get older, they find it difficult to stay together after retirement.
So this one we're really talking about, the economic stretch forces you to work in different towns. And by the way, we should have given a what do you call it? A disclaimer when we started this talk, that you may want to lynch us. Maybe this is why we are doing it virtually and not live, because some of you will want to crucify us after this, because I think we're going to touch on sensitive things. But I don't think you came to hear what you know and what you agree with. I think you came to be challenged tonight. And this thing is so common today, where the husband says, praise God, Pastor, I got a job in Qatar, and it's exactly what I've been praying for. It'll pay for our children's school fees. And you say, are they taking your family? Say, no, but they can be bringing me here every 6 months. I say, it's 6 months, 3 months. You're going to be apart for that long. You're developing what my wife called patterns of separation. And I think we had an older friend who discovered this when they retired. They were both used to working in different towns. The guy would come home over the weekends. In fact, for them, it was every weekend the guy came home.
Yeah.
But once they retired, and now they finally moved together in Nairobi. But they found after a very short time, it was not working out.
Yeah.
The wife is used to her space.
Yeah.
She's used to telling the kids what to do. She's used to shopping at the right. She's used to finding her things where they're supposed to be. And they're both used to having their own space.
In fact, the saying is, mzee anasumbua.
Mzee anakuja kunisumbua sasa. So, punde sipunde, we heard that the man has moved up country, and now he has gone to farm. He says, there's a farm, I really want to look after it. The wife is still in Nairobi. But what are they doing? They are sowing the seeds that they're reaping the seeds that they sowed all their lives. That they can only be a couple for a weekend. They don't know how to be together for longer than that.
Yeah.
And these are seeds that they sowed. And you know what? These are the seeds of loneliness in your old age.
Yeah.
That you'll actually end up lonely because you find yourself in a place where your marriage is weak and vulnerable because of the decisions you made. It looked justifiable when you're making it because of the economy, but then again, it's an issue of priorities.
Yeah. And we find that for a couple, for these couples, they were not enjoying the comfort of being together. The joy of companionship, sharing lives and stories. and especially now that the kids had left home, they ended up just being very lonely in their retirement. And we can say that our parents are awash with stories of so many of their peers who are full of regrets because they did not form a friendship when they were younger. And so now they're in a cold, joyless marriage. And I don't think that is what we want. I think for you, in this couples ministry, I think we are looking, to growing old together and enjoying our relationship even into old age. But we need to understand that maybe the decisions that we are making that are sowing those seeds of loneliness for later on.
And I think I'm privileged to have parents who, even today, I mean, you go visit them, they're both in their 80s, mid 80s.
Yeah.
And they have so many stories. I mean, they sit down, not even for us, for themselves. Like I can tell you, we visit them every Monday, and we'll always find them sitting down, talking outside the house. I mean, these guys, they love each other. They are each other's companion.
Yeah.
And it's such a joy for us to see. I mean, one of the decisions we made when we first got married is actually not when we first got married. I think later on in our marriage is that we would not have more than three weeks away from each other. Actually, it was just a decision we made.
It was actually before we got married, because I had a chance to go work in Kampala before we got married.
Ah, okay.
Yes,
okay.
So we made it before we got married.
So we made that decision, and it was actually something that we just said, even if an opportunity comes, if it's going to divide us, then our marriage is a priority. And so, as she says, she's gotten job offers that were lucrative, that would have maybe pushed us ahead financially.
Yeah.
But we're like, what does it profit a man to gain all that money and lose the person that he will enjoy the marriage with? And so there's some serious sacrifices. Somebody has just written to make marriage your priority. And so that, I think, is a major, major mistake that people have made. That's mistake number 3, not investing enough in the important relationships with your children, with your spouse. And then you find, again, I mean, the common thing of the wife traveling abroad nowadays because the kids have gotten children. So umeona hii kitu, mama ameenda sasa America to look after the kids, to look after the grandkids, and she's not there anymore. And people are all wondering,
and they're okay with that, actually,
because she doesn't have anything to do with the mzee.
Yeah.
But even the mzee has no relationship with the kids. I don't know if what do you say, Christopher?
Mzee anachoka mataa peke yake.
Anachoka mataa. And he's wondering what is happening. I mean, he has no stories with the kids because the kids don't even enjoy his sitting down. He doesn't even know how to talk with them. When he enters the room, everybody becomes quiet. But when they're with the mom, they're laughing, they're playing because of priorities again. What was the money for? It was for these people who you don't even enjoy and don't enjoy you anymore. And again, it's an issue of priorities. So investing in those important relationships, that's such an important one. Mistake number 4, let's move. Again, we're trying to finish quickly so that we have time, hopefully a bit of time for questions. Not planning for life after retirement. Not planning for life. I think it feels a bit common, maybe like one of the other ones we shared, but it's a bit different. So let me explain. One of the things that we've learned over life is that you have to give adequate thought to your retirement. And there are several things that are important in your retirement. The first one is passive income. What is passive income? Passive income is that amount of money that comes to you whether you are working or not, whether you are in the office or not, whether you are in the business or not, whether you're sick in the hospital bed or not, it is income. It still comes to you. Now, your money works for you when you have passive income. And what happens is that cash flow is the one that covers your needs as you grow older. You see, when you're younger, your biggest bills are usually your rent and school fees. But as you become older, the biggest bill will become your health, both physically and emotional, because your school fees hopefully will be paid. Hopefully, if by God's grace, you have a place to live, because at that age, you don't want to be paying rent or depending on others. But your health becomes a major bill. And what happens is many grow older, they've been so busy with their careers, they're first of all not even paid adequate attention to their health. So the little money they have for pension now is paid to doctors. And they're paying very expensive doctors because your premiums are very high for retirees because you're always in the hospital. And that's a major one. So if you don't have passive income, I'll give you an example. I don't know if some of you, but for our parents, they basically pay on average about $250,000 per year on their
health,
premiums,
yeah.
health premiums, to buy insurance. So for her mom, it's 250,000. For my mom, it's a similar amount. That money has to come from somewhere. Now, a lot of people don't have that. So what do? They live on the hope that they don't fall sick, and the assumption that if they do, we'll do a harambe. But that harambe is what could take the next generation into poverty. And so for you to adequately be covered so that you don't drag your children into poverty, it's going to cost you a significant amount of money to be able to make sure you've got the right health coverage at that age. So there's nothing as depressing as having to downgrade your healthcare. You're used to going to a private hospital. Now you're queuing in Kenyatta. But this is the reality for those people who don't plan adequately for their retirement. And so one of the things we teach a lot for couples in Couples and Money is how to multiply your income streams and convert them into passive income, not just plots, but actually money that is working for you.
Yeah. Okay. So under the whole thing of investing for life after retirement, we've talked about passive income, but we also need to talk about relationships. Now, good relationships are crucial for emotional well-being. And these become even more crucial as you age. And it was very interesting to hear our mentor say that one loses their importance or stature when they retire. All of a sudden, your phone goes quiet. You are a busy person. You could barely keep up with your phone calls, but your phone goes silent. No one is seeking your opinion. The business suits that were once so important lose their importance. The suits, the shoes, the handbags.
You have nowhere to wear them.
You have nowhere to wear them. And you become ordinary just like everybody else. And so what helps at this stage is having a retirement community that you can socialize with when your children are out of the house or when you are widowed. And in fact, one of the things that our mentor was telling us is that your children should not be your social circle. You should be thinking about your peers and planning with your peers in mind as you retire.
And that's a beauty. I think we in church have an advantage because we have the opportunity to form good relationships, other couples, other families who have similar values, and to actually think, how are we going to think through retirement together? I mean, one of the things that Kara and I are often thinking about is who are the couples we want to be nearby when we retire. When you are in your 80s, like my parents, even driving to see somebody on the other side of Nairobi is difficult. It's work. You can do it, but you can't do it every day. And so thinking through, I'm just giving you some thoughts that you can start to think through as you start saying, as we're recovering, it's not just money, it's the people that we're going to be with as we're older. And so if you don't see these relationships as trivial, you actually begin to value the friendships you have, because with time, they can become a very serious support community. Yeah. And we've seen that with our parents, and it's something that we're building for ourselves now.
Yeah. And somebody was just asking about how about for singles, and I think these principles also are true for singles. You don't want, there are some single parents actually, and you don't want to, you need to think, you don't want to overinvest in your children's education. You want to plan for your retirement. So all these things actually also apply for singles. It's not just for married
Absolutely.
couples. Yeah.
And apologies. We're talking about couples a lot because that was the brief we had been given. But I think they really do apply to all of us. Yeah. And Anne says, it's almost an abomination to the working force to think of retirement. We always think it's a neighbor who will retire, not us. And it's important for us to actually address it. Plan for it. Joseph was told in the Bible, the time is coming. There will be 7 years of plenty, and then there will be 7 years of lack. He did not live in ignorance. He did not start binding the spirit of poverty. As going to church to bind the spirit. What he did is he began to plan for the time it will not be there. So we need to plan for these things, because a time will come when money might be a challenge and friendships will be a challenge. And I think also it's important to have purpose, because what is the thing? We always say for couples, you need to have a bigger reason for money. What is money for? Because even if you're successful financially, if you don't have a bigger purpose than yourself, you're going to find that you live a very empty life afterwards. And so even now, in fact, the best time to develop it is when you don't have a lot of money. Just asking, what did God put us on this planet for as a couple? And if I'm an individual, what did God put? In fact, it's a good question to ask when you're still single, because when you look for a person to marry who has a similar sense of vision and purpose. And so if the vision God has given us is to make a difference, for instance, for Kara and I, one of the things that we're passionate about is education. We're so passionate about educating children who cannot, uplifting children who cannot afford their own education and making a difference in poor families. So every year we educate children ourselves, who we fund, even while we're funding our own children. It's not something we're waiting for the day we're rich. You start doing it we've been doing it for years. And the beautiful thing about that is, first of all, there are promises in the scriptures about that. God blesses and honors you as you do that. But secondly, it's the thing we exist for, because one day, if you have all the money in the world, what else are you living for? And I look at some of the challenges of our billionaires in Kenya is that they have so much money, but they will never be known for anything. There's a billionaire who died recently and had $20 billion. And it was $20 billion.
No, I think was it shillings?
20 billion shillings.
Still,
he basically just distributed that
to 6
8 billion he gave to his one son, 8 billion to another child, and then 1 billion each to his brothers. Not even a school in the village that is named after you, not even a well, not even a technical college that you started, because you had no purpose except just becoming rich. And so I think it's very important for us to just talk about those things as we think about planning for retirement. Yeah. So what is a big why? Okay, then this is the last one. Let's talk about the fifth one, which is not teaching our children about money. That's a major one that people don't think about. Yeah. Not teaching children about money.
Yeah. So we find ourselves as parents working so hard for our children, taking them to the best schools, amassing great wealth with the idea that these children will take care of these businesses after we're gone, in the next generation. But sadly, this is not the case. You will barely hear of successful African inheritance stories where the second generation has grown the initial business and passed it on to their own children. So it might be so-and-so and sons, but honestly, those sons come and squander everything. It does not live beyond their sons. And the question is, why is this the case? Why is this the case? And we find that parents are too busy creating wealth. We are too busy. We're not available to mentor our children on how to handle money. And instead, parents are thinking they are being loving when they lavish their children with all manner of toys,
phones,
buying them expensive gadgets, clothes, not realizing that by doing these things, you're actually raising consumers who will consume your wealth when you are gone.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you're going to find that our society today, there's a generation of kids who, especially of the middle class, who are not able to stand by themselves. And if you look seriously around you, you're actually going to start seeing examples of children who just find it very difficult to succeed because the mantra of their parents is, I want to make sure you don't go through the pain I went through. I want to make sure you don't go through the discomfort I went through. And unfortunately, they are not investing in teaching these kids about money. They are sparing them from any pain or any teaching them delayed gratification. And so as a result, these children have become, as my wife is saying, consumers. And I think it's you're going to read about even the inheritances that are left in this nation end up becoming fights. We know people who have children in their 40s and 50s who are still depending on their parents. And I think that's such a difficult and a scary place to be. So I think you want to make sure that you're not putting your children in that space because that's one of the big dangers. How do you teach your kids the responsibilities and teach them to cope in the real world? I mean, our children right now, like we said, are in their 20s and 18s. They're in college, the three. And so one of the things that we've done is, even from when they were younger, we taught them how to work in business.
Yes.
And so now in college, they're running a business, which is what supports them. It's what's paying their bus fare. It's what keeps them. I mean, we chip in for their school fees. But even that, I think it should be dated.
We should put ourselves by date.
They should actually be paying for themselves. At least they're managing their hair, their transport. They're doing all that for themselves by teaching them to start being responsible as opposed to giving them everything. So are you teaching your children about how to handle money? We were pastors. This is the biggest one. We were pastors in the US for several years, my wife and I. And we pastored many Kenyan children. And that's when we began to realize what a crisis it is, because they would be put on a plane with one term of school fees for college. And you realize that child has never even understood how to manage a checkbook. They don't know how a bank account works. They don't know how money works. And they're put on a plane and told, go and survive in the world. And the world is harsh. And so we began to see the dangers of not teaching your children about money from when they're young. And that's one of the ones that we don't want. We don't want to raise these consumers who cannot even think for themselves. They're just given toys by their parents from when they were young and taught to be consumers. Maybe a quick one is when we went to Germany, we stayed with a family that was a middle class family in Germany. And we looked around and they had no TV, no PlayStation, nothing. They just had shelves of books, a lot of books and toys, board games and toys that you build with your hands. And I remember we asked them about that. We said, wow, this is so fresh. This is so nice. Why do you do this? And they told us, in our country, it's only the blue collar workers. Are you understanding? The people who work, the low class, those are the ones who have those things. They're the ones who give their kids the gadgets.
The PlayStations.
Those are for the poor. They said for us, for people who are in our class, we teach our kids how to create those gadgets. We don't teach them to be consumers. And so they have these toys, the Legos, which you're being taught to be an engineer, you're being taught to assemble. That's what their kids do. They don't give them phones because those things just mess a child's brain. We're lied to when we're told that those things are helping our children become bright. And so they said those are things that are given to the poor. I was so shocked because I felt so sad for us. Because for us, it's the opposite. As soon as you have money, you start buying the gadgets that make your child a consumer. And so I think that's a very, very important thing for us to understand. Let's not make those decisions that will harm our children. Now, if you've been listening, I don't know which of these dangers. Maybe we can take a moment right now and just write the danger. I think the person who had put them up, just put them up and we can all indicate, even if you want to if you can just indicate it on the chat, which one do you feel is a key one for you? And I think Carol, maybe you want to share yours as it's there.
Oh yes. So I think the one that would have been a danger for me was mistake number one, and that was not investing early enough. And for me, I believe that owning a home, was a very nice thing. In fact, you see, I'm calling it a home, not a house. To me, it was a great achievement. So thankfully, I'm married, to you, who, really helped me just understand that, having an expensive home.
Other priorities.
There are other priorities, and that was the second one. And then for me, the second one is actually number 3, investing in career and not the relationships. If you remember when we were students, I was ready to be left in the US. In fact, I just told you, you'll be going home while I study, tutakutana huko mbele.
You almost broke our rule.
Yes.
She was telling me to go. She was telling me to go and she does another degree.
Yes.
And I just reminded her we had made a rule for the 3-week rule.
Yes.
And so I ended up staying an extra year in the US just to wait for her to finish, even though I hated it with all my heart.
Yeah.
But it was out of the commitment we had made. I think mine would actually be, if not for the mentors, I think number 2, and I think it's one that I would say. Over investing in children's education. I think it's such an emotional issue. You feel like I want to give you the best,
want to provide,
but many times I guess you realize you can end up spending so much that you're actually not getting it's that thing of value for money is huge when it comes to education. And then this other one about not investing enough in significant relationships. I think it's one I've had to learn, and I feel like for me, my wife has really taught me a lot about that. That I don't want to be those husbands who the kids have a fantastic relationship with the mom, but when the dad enters the house, they don't know what to talk about. Now, Carol is very good with friendships because I think your mom was good. So you learned from her how to just be very good friends with the kids. So one of the things I do is I come in when she's talking to the kids, I come and sit with them. Naingilisha tu hapo ndani. I start laughing with them. I start hearing their stories. And slowly that has really helped me over the years to become good with talking with the kids as well. And so I think it's just one of the things that I've realized is a key one. I can see Diane says not investing early enough is a major one. And said not teaching kids about money. And somebody else said not investing early enough, Christopher. Eva says not number 2 has shocked me. Thank you. Thank God that our children are still young.
Yeah.
It's true. These are good things to hear. For those who are young couples, some of these things are very good to hear now. Somebody else said not investing enough. Richard, I think that's a big one for people.
Yeah, not
I
investing
can
early
see
enough.
raising consumers, says Anne Andrew.
Wow.
That's a big one for us in this part of the world. Not planning for retirement, Stacy and Eva also. And then Salome says, it's true with children being responsible after showering them with lavish life. I can see Diane has listed all of them. So I hope you're listing yours. I hope you're thinking about yours and maybe even will be able to share them with your spouse. So I think those are the 5 things then, as you can see them. And let me just say this, as we have watched couples, we've both counseled. She's a counselor, we're pastors. As we've done a lot of work with couples over the years, written marriage curriculum that many have gone through, we've come to realize that finances are huge in the role that they play in the family. And it's actually this thing of finances, it's actually one of the top causes of divorce among couples today. Not just unsaved couples, but Christians as well. And so it's one of the reasons why in our homes, we must say that things must be different. When you begin to understand how to work with money as a team, I think that you begin to actually win, and that's why we wrote that curriculum, Couples and Money, because we want to help people win as a couple when it comes to money. And there are very important things you need to understand about money, right? I mean, there's some of the things we talk about.
Yeah. Well, some of the things we talk about are, how different family backgrounds and personalities cause us to approach money differently.
Yeah.
And the real thing is that every family is different. Some people are very open. They came from backgrounds where people are very open about their money. Others were very secretive. Some thought that African men don't talk to their wives about money. Others thought that wives should always have some secret stash account somewhere. Some families thought it's their job to look after younger siblings. And I think that came up in the chat.
The black tax.
And
then you marry somebody who doesn't have that expectation.
Yes,
and that's a cause of crisis.
Yeah. And other families saw their folks working together. And so with all these different family backgrounds, they cause a lot of drama when we come together.
So I think it's important to understand that those differences and deal with them. It's important to understand how to communicate about money. That's one of the most painful communications that many couples have, and just understanding that. It's important to understand to have a joint purpose for your money. It's important to understand about debt and how to defeat the evil, the mountain of debt that is destroying many couples today. Especially in this season's time. And it's important to learn how to invest your money together, make decisions, and to teach your kids about money. So again, these are the 5 mistakes. And if you avoid these mistakes, you'll not just bounce back, you will thrive. And our passion and our belief is that it's time for Christians to thrive. It's time for Christians to be the ones who manage wealth, because the Bible says everything in the world is the Lord's. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So why shouldn't we be the ones who are managing it well, as we are created actually to do it?